What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the State of the Program series brought to you by the Crossover U College Hoops Talk podcast. My name is Kanaye, and I'm joined with Josh. And today on this episode, we are going to be talking about the St. John's Red Storm. Really good second year for Rick Pitino and this Red Storm program. We all know how good Rick Pitino is with his second year turnarounds compared to what he does in his first year with the program. Did that at Providence, did it at Kentucky, did it at Louisville, now he's doing it with St. John's. Obviously, really good year. They won the Big East regular season and tournament. Were a 2 or 3 seed in the tournament. Can't remember off the top of my head. Might have been two. They were two. Obviously, got upset in the second round by Arkansas. Definitely something that was unforeseen. But a major thing that I think everyone pointed to regarding that program's weakness the whole entirety of last season was their lack of shooting. That kind of was what ended their season, if we're being honest. Particularly the play of their leading scorer that this past year, RJ Lewis, who is now going to the NBA draft. Didn't have that great of a game. Definitely a little bit of a tough ending for him, just considering Pitino benching him there. And it was really a unique situation that we're going to touch on at some point in this video today. But as always, with the State of the Program series, we're going to talk about what the Red Storm has lost in both guys going to the draft and hitting the transfer portal. We're going to talk about what this team has added. We're going to talk about the coaching, how they stack up in both the Big East and nationally going to next year, and just the vibe surrounding the program going to next year. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please engage with our content any way you can, whether it's liking our videos, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people about what we do here at the Crossover. It really does help with continuing to grow this channel. So to get into losses first, Josh, did you have any, as the St. John's resident expert here, do you have any particular strong feelings about what St. John's lost this offseason?
I will say St. John's did lose quite a bit. This is kind of the turnover you're going to have to expect in the new transfer portal era. I will say some of these losses are kind of harder than others. Kadari Richmond did graduate. You couldn't have gotten him back. He was a slight underwhelming character in the St. John's system last year. He was the number one overall transfer last year. He still averaged 12 a game, but he wasn't the main guy. That was RJ Lewis, who, in my opinion, he should have stayed, or he should have continued to stay in the college basketball sphere. He ends up going into the draft. He would likely be a second-round pick. I feel like his name kind of gets overpassed, which is very unfortunate. He had a great future. I think it was a little spoiled by the Arkansas game and the whole benching scenario. I don't think he would have wanted to have come back, and I don't think he would have needed to. But his outside shooting was just not there. Great inside shooter. I think he could have continued to hone that in and made a great name for himself in senior year. I know the NBA is more nowadays related to the outside three-point shot, so he probably doesn't get the role he might desire there. But I felt like in a good way he was going to leave. It felt very consistent that the way he was playing, he felt like a draft pick for the NBA. But even then, there was still that great opportunity for him to stay. And he did keep his name in the portal up until the very end. On top of that, though, they did lose most of their starting five. Devon Smith and Aaron Scott also left. And Simeon Wilcher and Brady Dunlap and Vince Nwachukwu were bench guys, ended up transferring. I think this is kind of a tough loss to admit. There was a lot of your starting five and your bench that does go. This can be replaced, and it does get replaced, which we'll get to with the additions. But it is kind of a lot of risk, especially with the consideration that these guys didn't graduate or get drafted. Most of them left on their own. So, right. In a way, I kind of have to put St. John's down on this one. I would kind of give this a 7. It's not irreplaceable, but losing a guy like RJ Lewis when you could have gotten him back theoretically is rough. Losing a bench player like Simeon Wilcher is rough. Losing a guy like you can just go through the list. It's just not the best scenario.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, they were able to replace a lot of what they lost, but it really is hard to ignore losing your leading scorer who you could have gotten back in RJ Lewis. He averaged 18.2 points per game this past year. You lose 4 of your starters between RJ Lewis, Kadari, Davon, and Aaron Scott. Simeon Wilcher was a great bench piece who definitely could have took a leap. Same thing goes for Brady Dunlap, who I know was hurt this past year. Same thing goes for Vince Nwachukwu. definitely could have been a bigger role, potentially coming off the bench. But I really do think losing all that is really, really hard to ignore. And I personally had St. John's at a 6 for losses.
Ooh. I think I'm going to keep it at a 7. I think that these aren't horrible, but in comparison to the previous state of the program losses from the other 5 schools we've mentioned, I don't think that this compares. This is probably the worst of the losses, and it's kind of how things were just going to go. It's a little unfortunate, but they make up a lot for it in the additions, which I think Kanaye can start.
Yeah, no, I'm willing to call it to a 7 for that for sure. But yeah, I think what's pretty much the bulk of this video is what they added. St. John's, I think, put together, you could make the argument, a top 3 most talented roster going into the country next year. I know in our Kentucky video, if you haven't seen that, definitely go check that out. We both came out and said that we think Kentucky has the most talented roster in the country going to the next basketball season. I think St. John's is just behind in terms of raw talent they had. In the transfer portal, they were able to add Bryce Hopkins at Providence. Only played 3 games last year. Probably could have played him more, but I think he sat out some of them because he wanted to be granted the medical red shirt. He obviously was and is now transferred to St. John's. Between him and them getting back Zuby Ejiofor, which was really, really important, honestly could end up being the most important thing for St. John's this offseason cycle. Getting back your starting 5-man, a guy who I think is probably going to open up as the preseason favorite to win the Big East Player of the Year award, as well as maybe being first preseason All-American on the first team potentially. I think between those 2 guys, you might have the best starting front court in the country when you are fully healthy. On top of adding Bryce Hopkins, you add Ozziah Sellers, who's going to bring shooting, which is something they completely lacked last year. He averaged around 14 points a game at Stanford this past year, shot the ball 40% from 3. Josan Sainon, you're adding from Arizona State, was a former 5-star who maybe Bobby Hurley couldn't fully unlock. Not a slight to Bobby Hurley, but I think Rick Pitino was a lot better of a coach than Bobby Hurley. But Bobby Hurley came out and said that he thinks Sainon is the best shooter he's ever coached in his time being a college basketball coach. So he's going to bring some shooting. He's going to bring some off-ball, going to bring off-the-dribble creation. Same thing goes with Ian Jackson, who was pretty solid in stretches for UNC, but tended to disappear at times, especially late in game. Not the greatest defender, but really, really good at breaking guys down, going to the basket. He shot the ball really well, around 40% from 3, and 42%, I believe it was, on catch-and-shoot opportunities, which put him in the 92nd percentile this past season. The number one thing with Ian Jackson is if he's going to be able to convert and play point guard, which is kind of what the vision I think Rick Pitino has for Ian Jackson. I think originally they were really trying to go after a true point guard like Xavier Lee, who did end up going on a visit to St. John's, ultimately chose Florida. If you haven't seen our State of the Program episode on Florida, definitely go check that out. We talk about Xavier Lee a lot in that episode. But I think he wanted to bring in Ian Jackson regardless of being able to land a true point guard or not. Now he didn't get a true point guard. He got Ian Jackson. Both him and Sainon didn't have great assist rates at their previous locations. Ian Jackson's coming up from UNC, where his assist rate, I believe, was under 2%, which is not great if you're bringing him in to play the point. But I definitely think Rick Pitino is capable of converting Ian Jackson, becoming a true point guard. I think that's what Ian Jackson has to do to prove he is an NBA first-round pick or a true pro. And he definitely has great size, which is perfect for the Big East. Like I mentioned, he's great breaking guys down off the dribble. But it's really going to come down to if he can play point guard, which we're going to be eagerly waiting to see if he can. Now, in the case that doesn't work, they did also bring in Dylan Darling, who averaged nearly 20 points a game at Idaho State this past year, was the Big West Player of the Year. Like I mentioned, close to 20 a game, almost 5 or 6 assists a game. Can't remember fully off the top of my head. But in the scenario where Ian Jackson doesn't work out a point, I could definitely see Dylan Darling maybe starting a few games for St. John's, or at least at worst coming off the bench and providing the playmaking that they need. And on top of that, they also added Dylan Mitchell, who is a guy that I think has a lot of untapped potential, was solid at times for Cincinnati this past season, but I think Pitino can definitely unlock him. He's a really good athlete and someone who's going to bring a lot of defense, which the St. John's is losing with what they lost in this past year's class. But on top of that, they're also adding Hanjay Tamba. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. He's coming from Milligan University, so stepping up a level to the high major level, but I'm not really sure how much he's going to play this year, but he's definitely a guy who can provide some depth if needed. But yeah, I mean, this portal class, really great. Probably I would probably say a top 5 transfer class in the country this year.
Definitely. Great. Pitino, once again, cooked in the portal. He's known to do this. He loves using the portal, he said on record. which I think is a big deal for an older coach like him. Keeps his vitality going. And I think Kanaye hit on every point. Once again, Zuby is the main guy here, but Hopkins, Jason, Sellers, there are guys here that can fill every single role this team needs. I will say the questions are still there. Will Zuby be that guy at the center? Is Bryce Hopkins going to stay healthy? How trustworthy is Ian Jackson at that point? Are we going to see Jason Sanan blossom and Sellers fill the role he did at Stanford? How is the bench going to play? I do feel like the questions are a little bit more than enough to limit them. I would personally put this at an 8, but I could bump it up to a 9, considering just the ceiling this team has with this roster. It's a great
I
ceiling.
actually, yeah, I actually also had him at an 8. I think the one thing that's just kind of holding me back is really just my concerns with one, the point guard spot. If Ian Jackson doesn't work out, you have Dylan Darling, but at the same time, he's stepping up a level coming from a mid-major school, and you really just don't know how mid-major guys play. Will play at the high major level until you see them play. So, if Ian Jackson doesn't work, there's still a chance Dylan Darling also doesn't work either. He's a little bit smaller. The Big East is filled with big guards. That's how the conference play is, really physical. And you just don't know how a guy coming from the mid-major level is going to handle that. On top of that, I worry about them losing their defensive identity. Ian Jackson is by no means the greatest defender. Same thing can be said for both Ozai Sellers and Joe Sansanon. Bryce Hopkins as well. Then again, they all bring great size, which definitely helps defensively, where you've got Zuby anchoring the paint. It's a lot tougher to get around bigger guys, even if they aren't the best isolation individual defenders themselves. So having a last line defense like Zuby is definitely really impactful. And again, size is really important, especially in the Big East, and they have size. So I think those are really the true concerns. But again, I think those are the only things holding me back from having them any higher. But I would think an 8 is probably a good rating for them.
I definitely agree. Another great point, and a point that I think could change a lot of conversations, is the coaching. Obviously, Rick Pitino is one of the greatest to ever do it. He's here, possibly one of his last great hurrahs as a coach in the college basketball sphere. He's doing it at St. John's. This is his third year. We know we've had the conversation about the second year, but the third year is typically just as good. And I think, once again, this is another wonderful class. I kind of just want to give him a 10. I get it that he never really seems to understand how to work with the new three-point system. He's always been used to being an inside the paint scoring type of offense, which hurt them last year, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. He can do it. He's the only coach who's ever really done it, living off of the inside scoring. I think this team, though, is a lot better built for outside scoring than last year. Hopkins is a pretty good three-point shooter. Sellers is known for his three-point shooting. I think this kind of changes things. And I think the defense that Pitino is known to mold can pretty much get rid of the issues that we see with guys like Jackson and Hopkins who have had these previous defensive problems. Is a 10 worthwhile? I feel like it's Pitino. It's so
Yeah,
hard to.
I don't have a problem giving him a 10. I mean, I just think last year was really a testament to Rick Pitino being one of the greatest coaches we've ever seen in college basketball. I mean, what he's done in being able to turn programs around time after time, location after location, he's done it at the mid-major level. He's done it at the high major level. Maybe it didn't work in the NBA, but he came back to college and did it again. And hear me out. I mean, yeah, he kind of had to go more so inside last year with how he ran his offense, just considering they didn't have the shooting. Kind of same thing that went on at Louisville, but now he has shooting. I think he can kind of go back to those Providence days where they made a Final Four with Billy the Kid, Donovan. They can shoot all the threes they want. My number one thing is if Rick Pitino is able to convert Ian Jackson to being a true point guard. And I definitely think he's capable of being able to get Ian to do that. It's going to take time. I'm sure he's hammering right now in practice, trying to get Ian to learn the offense, learn how to read the court better than what he did at UNC. And I mean, again, at the end of the day, not to hate on Hubert Davis here, but let's not overthink it. It's Hubert Davis versus Rick Pitino. I'm taking Rick Pitino every day of the week, twice on Sunday. And I'm just really excited to see how this St. John's team plays this year. I mean, Rick Pitino got a taste of success in New York City. And, I mean, he came back when he took the job at St. John's. He said it's not a matter of if St. John's returns to glory, it's when. And they're already back to being a true competitor in the Big East. They're going to be this year. They might open. I would say they probably open up as the favorite to win the Big East going into the preseason. And you got retention. You really went all in on spending in the portal. I mean, St. John's budget is completely blown up, and since Rick Pitino's come on board there, and it's really cool to see a school that was really struggling, one of the main cornerstones of the Big East for years and years, just having that down phase for them in the program's history, for them to come back and be back at the top of the Big East. It's so great to see for both the conference and just the rest of the country. I mean, college basketball is better when the Big East is good. St. John's getting back to being good was super important for the Big East, and we're seeing the benefits of it now. Big East is going to be great, a lot better than what we saw this past year, in my personal belief. And I think a lot of credit has to go to Rick Pitino.
Definitely. And let's talk about the Big East. The conference play this year will be miles better than the past, I think, 2 years. UConn is right on the tail. They've had a great offseason as well. They're going to be back to the old Hurley days of just 2 years ago. Creighton is reloaded well. Marquette should be a tournament team. I expect big things from Providence and Georgetown, who have reloaded very successfully, if you're going to ask me. I like the new Pitino rivalry that could happen with Xavier. That could be a team that could theoretically make the tournament. I think this is a completely changed Big East. This could be a competitive conference again. Arguably the best conference for college basketball, maybe besides the SEC, but the tradition and legacy is still so much more ingrained here. How do you feel about St. John's in the Big East in conference play?
I mean, I feel really good about St. John. If I'm a St. John's Red Storm fan, I'm feeling really good about them in the Big East and nationally as well. I think I really am a firm believer that Rick Pitino is going to be able to get Ian Jackson to be a point guard. And even if that doesn't work, I like Dylan Darling a lot. He brings so much playmaking. He's a great downhill scorer, can shoot the ball too. He's tough, which he's a little bit undersized for a Big East guard, but he's tough. He plays defense, which is what you need to be if you're playing for Rick Pitino. And again, I would probably say they open up as a preseason favorite in the Big East. They also probably have the preseason Big East Player of the Year in Zuby Ejiofor, who I honestly would probably have on my preseason first-team All-American team, which is to come in the coming months. So definitely be on the lookout for when we put those out. Yeah, I think they stack up really well in the Big East. I would definitely have them as, again, the favorite going into the preseason, if not a top two team. I think it's St. John's 1, UConn's right behind, followed by Creighton. And then you make your pick of Georgetown, Providence.
Yeah. Do you think a 9 is a fair score for conference?
I think it's a 9. I don't think the Big East is as good as some of the other conferences like the SEC or Big 12, like you mentioned. But I think it will be better than last year. I think you're going to have more opportunity for quad one, marquee resume building wins than you did last year. And I just think St. John's is going to do really good in the Big East. They have great size. They have a lot of play. But they just got a lot of dudes this year. It's just going to come down to how the point guard spot is handled, pretty much.
Definitely. And then I think it leads to vibes. Personally, I've been a big fan of St. John's as a New Yorker. I've been to the Big East tournament. I was there last year when they won it. It honestly gave me the vibes that we saw recently with the OKC Thunder winning. It's that culminating point of a young, scrappy, strong team that muscled their way very easily, I'll admit, through the Big East last year. I don't think it's going to be that easy, but New York is alive and red for the team. I kind of want to give this a 9 as well. They feel so strong. This is the St. John's that I think so many players and so many people have been missing for well too long, and to have them be now a consistent force in the college basketball world, and especially in the New York sphere, which has been missing on a good Syracuse, I'll admit. We need this as a state. I think so many people want this back. I just think a 9 is the best grade for this one.
Yeah, I love how you hit on the state of New York needing St. John's to get back to its former glory. I mean, last year's team was probably the best St. John's team since the 90s, if we're being honest. I mean, record-wise especially. And just for Rick Pitino's talk about St. John's being the 11th or 12th pro team in New York. And I love that because winning in New York is different than winning anywhere else. You felt what it did to the Garden to have St. John's be good. You had Spike Lee showing up to games. I don't even know if Spike Lee could have named more than 3 players on St. John's last year, but he was still out there cheering those guys on. And just that last year was probably the first year in I can't tell you how long where St. John's would have a home game, say against UConn, and it would be 70% red as opposed to a maybe 50, 60, 40 split of red and then maybe navy blue. And it's a true home environment for St. John's now. And when you can get the Garden bumping, that does so much for your players on the court and as a program. St. John's fans got a taste of what it means for St. John's to be back to its former glory being atop the Big East. And I don't think the fans are losing energy anytime soon, especially with what they're bringing in this year. Super excited for the Red Storm. I think they're going to make a great part to what should be a much better revamped Big East this season. And they're just another reason why I'm super excited for this year of college basketball to come.
Definitely. And listen, this is a lot like last year. Pitino is kind of title chasing. I think there's a place for St. John's to win the title this year as well. I don't think they do it. But this team gives me better vibes than last year. Last year's team just had too many weaknesses. They fell to a good Arkansas team. I don't think it can happen again. I think another 2 seed is in line, maybe even a 1 seed if they can push it. There's a great shot for an Elite Eight, a great shot for a Final Four. I don't think this is a bust if they don't make it, but this is just every opportunity St. John's has is right in front of them. This is the year to get it. I think this could be the last year for some, but I really feel like this team is completely reloaded in every way it needs to be. I do hope and pray that RJ Lewis can see this team afterwards. I get it. He missed a great opportunity in his last year, but this team is right back in it. And I think that's such a big point to be made about St. John's this year.
Most definitely. And I think this is pretty much going to take care of everything we had for this episode of the State of the Program series today. As always, engage with our content any way you can. It really does help with growing what we do at this channel. And until next episode, we'll see you all next time.